Okay, it's working. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Perspective. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. We are talking to one of my favorite people today, Rebecca Chopp. Some of you may remember her because we've interviewed her before. She's three-time university president, living with Alzheimer's. And I say living with a very big capital L because what Rebecca does will amaze you. She's coming out with a new book called Still Me. Rebecca, I forgot the rest of it. Still Me, accepting Alzheimer's without losing yourself. And so we are really excited to have her here today. So great to see you, Rebecca.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you, Deborah.
Okay, so for people who don't know you, you're quite extraordinary in the fact that I truly mean it. I feel like life got bigger for you, which is kind of hard to imagine considering that you were, three-time university president. But since your diagnosis, it feels like your world is just getting bigger and bigger. Tell me a little bit first why you decided to write this book.
Well, thank you. And I think my world is larger and more colorful than it ever was. When I first got diagnosed, now almost 5 years ago, there was no go-to handy source. My doctor didn't say, here's how to live well with Alzheimer's, though she did. She did give me some wonderful advice on diet and exercise. But I was in despair and, desperation. And I finally had a couple of friends reach out to me with this and that. And I did a lot of research. So I wrote the book so that people who get diagnosed will not have to spend a year flailing around and looking hither and thither for resources. That's the first reason. I wanted at least one place to go get initial how to move through this diagnosis, how to live well. I also wanted to inspire people to do it because it is depressing when you get the diagnosis. I was in total despair. But you can't stay there. If you stay there, you're going to get worse. We know that depression and anxiety will make those symptoms come along even sooner. And who wants to do that? So I wanted to inspire people to step forward, to find a story, to live well. And third, I wanted to educate everyone I know about the importance of early diagnosis and the importance of removing the stigma that we have that Alzheimer's leads to instant loss of independence.
Yes. Okay, let's back up a little just for people who don't know you very well. How many years has it been? It was 2000, was it 19 or 18
Yes,
when
it was
2019?
March 7, 2019, when I received the official Alzheimer diagnosis.
Okay, and so for people who don't know you, you were the president, the chancellor of University of Denver at the time, right? So you were leading a very big academic institution. A lot of demands, a lot of socialization is required, a lot of, thinking and just you have to be switched on a lot, right? I remember talking to you about this a little bit prior, but tell us a little bit about that initial you didn't know you had Alzheimer's yet. You went to the neurologist after cognitive assessments, you were diagnosed. Then, I can't even imagine what goes through your mind when the A word is mentioned.
It was incredibly scary. The testing had gone on for 5 months, I think. And I knew that something could be wrong, and Alzheimer's had been mentioned. My mother and both my grandmothers had Alzheimer's, and that made me even more scared because it was some years ago and they weren't diagnosed until the very later stages. So I was scared. I was having the time of my life as chancellor. I didn't want to step down. But once I got that diagnosis, I wanted to spend more time with my family. I didn't want to make any mistakes at this institution. I I wanted some time left because I didn't know how soon those terrible symptoms might appear.
Hey, hi, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Perspectives. I'm Deborah Kahn. If you were on before, apologies. We had a little bit of a technical problem. We're talking to Rebecca Chopp. She's three-time university president, diagnosed with Alzheimer's, has an amazing book coming out very soon. And we were just talking about her diagnosis with Alzheimer's. So I'm going to pick up where we left off. Rebecca, sorry for the interruption, but glad that you are still with us. We were talking about that initial diagnosis. When you went to the neurologist, you were university president at University of Denver, and you go to the neurologist and you learn that you have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I can only imagine what that's like, what that feels like. But tell us where you were at that point.
My husband and I were petrified. We were shocked. We were scared. We had heard the word used already in the last 5 months, but I didn't really know much about Alzheimer's. I had the same stigma about it that so many do. I thought you got diagnosed and within a year or two, you couldn't button your shirt or you lost your independence. We'd worked all of our lives. We hadn't even really spent time together. So I was devastated. I was shocked. We were scared about our future. So, the ground opened and I went into Hades. That's how I felt.
Mm. Now, I imagine what follows is a big depression, right? I mean, like what next? So I think what would be really helpful to people is to really understand, like, when was that aha moment that I'm not dying, I'm living, I can live a different way. How did you get yourself out of that funk of that initial shock of diagnosis into, wait a second, this isn't bad, I can live my life a different way?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I don't, everybody I talked to who had gone through that diagnostic experience at the same time I did 5 years ago, got very depressed. It took me months, quite frankly. I had to research about Alzheimer's. I was very fortunate in that I was in a university. And the people in KIA, the Nobel Institute for Healthy Aging at Denver, started to reach out to me. And they brought me this notebook about what is Alzheimer's. They talked to me about what I could do. They told me, and one neurologist told me, I might live for 15 years. So gradually, because I didn't have anything else to fill my time, I started doing research. And after, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, I realized, based on all the research, that if I could cooperate with my health, if I could follow my doctor's orders, so to speak, I might have the chance to live very well for many years. And I wanted to. I wanted to spend time with my family. After a couple more months, I decided I wanted to step forward and become an advocate. I wanted to do all I could for research, for treatment, and also to help others get diagnosed, but also not have to spend months and months and months wallowing around like I did.
Well, I mean, months is, I mean, some people, understandably it's life altering, but I think it's really good for people to see you were in 2019. It's been what, 5 years now,
5 years.
since your diagnosis. And I think the initial reaction, because of the stigma around Alzheimer's, is of the old person who is diminishing, right? And who is declining. I'm sure you get this all the time. And I know people who are diagnosed, it ignores them. It annoys them rather, but it's like, well, you don't really seem like you have Alzheimer's, right? I'm sure that happens to you all the time. Talk to me a little bit about that. Does that annoy you? Does that, when people say you don't seem like you have Alzheimer's?
I see it as an opportunity, right? Because it's an invitation to educate them. Because, stigma is this horrible word that we carry around, these terrible ideas. But there's a softer form of stigma, and that's it. They don't know enough. They think as long as you're fairly functional, you must not have Alzheimer's. And I get that a lot. I still get that, and it's been 5 years. Um, you know, I think, when you're faced with this life-altering news, one of the things you can do is decide that everything's going to be an opportunity, an invitation, a way to step forward. And so that's how I handle it.
And I love the title of your book because it says exactly what it's meant to be, which is still me, accepting Alzheimer's without losing yourself. Um, Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, since I've gotten to know you, I understand where you're coming from. It's truly that. I mean, you did not let this disease take you down in any ways. You are still, and I always use you as an example. Like I remember when I was first launching Being Patient and I was speaking to a neurologist and they were explaining to me what an Alzheimer's brain does. And I remember this particular neurologist saying, Alzheimer's brains don't learn anything. You don't learn anything new. And you are living proof that that's complete BS. You can learn new things. And I continuously use you as an example. Your art, for example, is what you found painting. You weren't a painter before, you learned how to paint. Um, that is proof that you can still learn. So tell me a little bit about that and really what you've learned from becoming an artist now.
Well, it is true. Doctors used to think you can't learn anything new. And now, of course, they're saying, oh, the best thing to do is keep learning. So thank goodness the science is changing. I had a friend encourage me to take up art, and I was the kid who couldn't paint. But I went off with her because she gave me a free weekend at Crested Butte. She brought some of my best friends along, and we all had a great weekend together. And I kind of enjoyed it. I could lose myself in it, and I like color. So it was fun. And then I got hooked. And I took some lessons and I did some portraits. I do abstracts. It has meant so much to me. It calms me. And anything we can do to fight anxiety and to stay calm is good. I learned all sorts of things. I used to think here was another idea I had in my brilliant head that there was nothing to it. If you had talent, you picked up the brush and you painted. But that's just not true at all. I mean, artists learn their whole lives. So I learned all sorts of stuff. One of the most interesting classes I took was a class about how the master painters painted the great portraitures using the glazing technique to add depth. That was fascinating. So it has done so much for me. It's also taught me to see the world differently. I mean, a walk now out in the forest is different. I'm fascinated with people's faces. I have to really hold myself back from going up to a stranger in the grocery store saying, you have the most interesting mouth. Could I take a picture of it? I mean, it's bad. But what a wonderful world to see these shapes and forms and colors.
The creative brain still really flourishes, and you see that with music, you see it with art and painting, and it's quite amazing that you've proven you can really learn something, very new. I think we're getting a question, and I think most likely because people see you and say, God, Rebecca, you're doing so well. It's amazing, right? So Terry's asking now, are you taking lecanemab? Just to let people know, lecanemab is one of the new monoclonal antibody therapies that has been approved by the FDA, aimed at employing our immune systems, mimicking our immune systems to reduce the amount of beta amyloid plaque in the brain, which is one of the earlier hallmarks of the disease. So Terry would like to know if you're on lecanemab or Leqembi, as it's known.
I'm not. I'm watching those drugs very carefully. My neurologist worries about the side effects. These drugs are so promising. What's coming down the road, even more promising than what we have now. Right now, lecanemab comes with some side effects. And because I am doing fairly well and I am avid about diet and exercise, creativity, social engagement, my neurologist and I have decided to wait and see, for another year. Every time I meet with her, we check it out.
Have you had scans? Have you had a PET scan or any of the blood tests, Rebecca, to confirm if you do have plaque?
I do have plaque. I had a PET scan.
You had a
I
PET.
have not yet had the blood test, but as your wonderful recent episode focused or your writing focused on the blood tests, they aren't perfect yet, but I do intend to get one soon. I again, we're on the edge of the frontier,
Yeah.
and so I'm keeping very much on top of it. I think everyone should keep on top of it. I would say about half of my friends who have Alzheimer's are trying to get Leqembi or on it. A few of them actually have gotten it, but most are. There's a long wait list.
Yeah, it is. That is very true. Instill me accepting Alzheimer's without losing yourself. You have a lot of analogies to Greek gods. I loved when I read it. I loved reading it for it actually brushed me up on my Greek history. Tell me a little bit about that. Why did you include that? Why when you were writing this book, because it happens throughout, was Greek ancient Greek so important?
I for me, so much of this journey has been about reframing. Of seeing that I can live with joy, but trying to imagine it. So I think the first story, and I tell this in my book, is Persephone. And, it's such a beautiful story because she is a goddess of color, of flowers, and she gets caught by the king of Hades. And she has to, a deal is made where she can live most of the time, but she still has to go back to Hades. So for me, those Greek stories, I'm also, I'm also very into religious stories too, but those Greek stories often are so both and, right? And that one's perfect because most of the time I do well, but sometimes I get very, very anxious. So I have a lot of anxiety. And though I look like I'm doing great, I have short-term memory loss. I don't drive anymore. So most of the time I live in the spring with color and flowers, but it's not perfect.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your memory and whether or not you feel like it's kind of, I think probably what people would want to know is you obviously are very proactive about your health, right? You've changed your lifestyle, whether it's diet, exercise, learning new things. So talk to me a little bit about that memory loss. You said you do have short-term memory loss. Do you feel like it's kind of staying the same? Do you feel like at times it's worse? You're very like in touch with your health. So tell me a little bit, do you feel like certain times it's worse than others? And have you tracked maybe what may be happening?
Yes, I think 5 years ago, my short-term memory was really good. It's not so good now. It gets worse when I'm stressed, or when I'm tired. I don't even have to be stressed. I can be around stress when my husband gets stressed. So again, I mean, it's there. It's very stress related. Even when I'm calm, though, I used to have an almost photographic memory, and I'm still very good, remembering long ago. I can remember pretty much everything, but there's not a time I don't walk into the kitchen that I have to say to myself, "What am I here for?" Now I know that's part of aging, but this is way more than aging.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about the anxiety, I remember when you were first describing to me what some of the earlier symptoms were, and it was anxiousness, right? It was like getting anxious in crowds and when you went out to university events and things like that. So that direct connection between kind of anxiety and really kind of accelerating or enhancing the symptoms that you're feeling is really interesting. Do we know what triggers? Why is anxiety bad? I mean, we know it's bad chronically for the brain, but why in terms of Alzheimer's do you think it enhances? Have you ever had an explanation as to why, anxiety might make your memory worse?
Well, I don't know that it's that direct, but it leads to inflammation in the brain. And I think if you want to put it in layperson's terms, so the moment you get anxious, your brain goes on hyperdrive. So it kind of makes common sense that wherever your weak spots are in the brain, they're going to be weaker. Now, that's not a high science, but the twofold explanation I have read about is one, it increases your inflammation, and second, your brain gets just as anxious as the rest of your body.
Cheryl has just written that a few years ago, after I was diagnosed, I started writing poems. I'd never written poems before. I've written 45 poems about living with a memory impairment. I can understand how Rebecca's art is helping her. My writing has become very healing for me. Would you describe painting as healing?
Oh, definitely. And I just want to say, first of all, Cheryl, applaud, applause, applause. I hope I get to see some of your poems, publish them, or find a way to get them to me. I'd love to read them. Yes, I think, for me, it is about living in awe, and painting calms the anxiety down. But there is a kind of abiding. Awe is the sense of abiding in the universe, connected to something greater. Now, I can call that God, you might call it something else. But anything that connects us and brings us beyond ourselves is, I think, very spiritually healing. And that's what the arts have always done. I remember my grandmother, one of the two who died of Alzheimer's, she was a master gardener. And I look back now and I realize that she was a different person when she was out there in that garden. She was being healed by the beauty of that.
And nature, the connection to nature. My mom too was an avid gardener. And, it's like I'm just taking in so many of the things that you're saying because, my mom is now in a late stage of Alzheimer's, but she colors for hours.
Isn't that great?
And amazing. And she stays perfectly within the lines and she's meticulous about it. And you can tell it means a lot to her, So there's something about that connection, that creative connection that really is so powerful.
Yeah, it's accessing parts of our brain and soul in a very, very different way. It's extremely important. I'll tell you a quick story. A year ago at Valentine's Day, I taught a class for people in later stage Alzheimer's on how to paint a Valentine. And, they didn't need instruction. It was just kind of kickstarted the experience. And everybody did great. Now, some colored in the lines and some didn't. Some could draw the lines and some couldn't. But there was one man who was a professional artist, and he was, he was in a wheelchair and he wasn't moving much and he was nonverbal. And he painted, must have been a heart to him at that point. But then at the end, I asked people to show their hearts, and he got up and sang. He sang this beautiful song. And his wife said, he has not sung for 4 years. There's
Wow.
something about doing art that touches, I think, not only our brain, but our soul and our body.
100%. So describe to me the Rebecca pre-diagnosis versus Rebecca today. Like, tell me how, I mean, we know like little flashes of what you've talked about, but tell me how you've changed as a person.
Um, so personality changes, or what I used to do and what I do
Just
now.
how you're, well, first let's start with lifestyle. How's your lifestyle changed?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would get up at 4:30. I would do email for a half an hour. I did work out for 45 minutes, and then I'd work till 9 at night. And, presidents and chancellors solve problems, meet donors, deal with students. Maybe student disciplinary problems are great, just engagement, help the faculty. It's a huge, being huge, a CEO of a huge company. So I worked. And if I had any time off, I hiked. I had friends, but I didn't get to see them much. I wasn't conscious of what I ate. I tried to eat healthy, but I didn't even care what I ate. And a couple glasses of wine at a reception, no big deal. So now I rise, I take it easy. I walk my dog for an hour. I come back, and I was writing my book. I paint. I walk my dog again. I spend time with my friends. I've joined 2 book clubs. Um, I spend a lot of time with my son, who drives me and helps me. And he's an artist, so that's great. We can go do art things together. So it's I do lots of hiking. So it's a more relaxed, more engaged. Um, and I've used the word awe before. My goal every day is to live in awe.
That's a great, I mean, we all should follow that with or without a diagnosis, right?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
It's a happier existence and
Yeah.
it just I mean when you're describing it, I'm thinking, oh man, maybe I should like just like enjoy life more. It sounds wonderful. Um,
Yeah. And I'm not unaware of the problems of the world, and I'm not unworried. I'm very worried. I remember hearing the Dalai Lama one time speak and talking about, even when you're addressing injustices and how Alzheimer's patients are dealt with sometimes as an unjust situation, it's better to do it from a state of awe and happiness and joy. So I think that's something I've learned, that I probably didn't realize before, because I didn't realize that you could build awe in your mind, in your psychology, just like you build anything else, that it can be a choice no matter what you're facing.
Absolutely. And attitude is it way. So I have an aunt whose mother, so an aunt through marriage, her mother lived to 109 years old.
Mm.
And I asked, well, what's her secret? And she said, quite frankly, she just never worried about things that weren't in her control. And I was like, that's a great way to live. There are certain things that aren't in our control, and why worry about them, right? So
So true.
it
Yeah.
really is. And what you were saying reminded me so much. So just to kind of wrap it up here, what do you hope the book, I mean, obviously the book is coming out February 27th. Don't forget to order it. I think it's going to be on Amazon. Still Me, Accepting Alzheimer's Without Losing Yourself. Is that where people can get
Right.
it, on Amazon
Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
and Barnes and Noble? It really is a great read. I was telling Rebecca when she first gave me the book to read, I couldn't stop. It's one of these page turners, and it's a really, it makes you feel good. Your book makes you feel good. And if anyone is living with Alzheimer's, it's you. And I said that at the beginning with a big capital L, living, not dying, right? So Before we wrap up, Cheryl's asking another question, and she said, I'd love to know how Rebecca got her book published. Did she have any help? Because obviously Rebecca's thinking about publishing her book, which is wonderful. What advice do you give to people who may have other writings to share?
Well, it's a great question. I have a very good friend who has worked in marketing and consulting, and she did help me. She helped me connect with the press. And that press then found me a fabulous editor. And what I would say to anybody is find a great editor. And this woman made it a book that's more readable and laughable and not quite self-helpy, but there's a lot of practical guidance in that book. But there are lots of presses. So you can Google self-publishing. You can also go get an agent. I did what is called hybrid publishing, which is a form of both where I upfronted some of the costs, but by no means all. And that gave me a lot more control over the book, having published traditional books with big presses, you give up all the control. So I like the hybrid model, but there are also self-publishing presses. So it's easier than you might think. Just start Googling and asking around. In every town, there are small presses that publish.
And finally, Rebecca, so what do you want people when they read your book? What do you want the takeaway to be? If you say, I've succeeded in writing, I mean, you've obviously succeeded in writing the book, but like, what is that success? What's that takeaway that you want people to have?
I want people to go get diagnosed if they see any change in normal behavior. If diagnosed with MCI or dementia or Alzheimer's, I want them to use the book as a guide, an inspiration and a guide. I want general public to read it and get educated so we get over this terrible stigma we've been talking about. And I hope it sells lots because all of the money off this book will go to support Alzheimer's research, treatment, and care.
Well, and so everyone, that's reason enough. I mean, it's a great book to read though. And I couldn't recommend it to anyone. And I think when you read it too, it's a lot less scary, right? To me, reading it makes it feel a lot less scary because we see your living life and you've been through it, and I think that it does just the world great service. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you. And you just answered the question better than I did. First of all, I want people to read the book and not be so scared.
Yeah, absolutely. Always the greatest of living with Alzheimer's, Rebecca Chopp. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, everyone, go buy her book, Still Me, Accepting Alzheimer's Without Losing Yourself. Coming to the Off the Press very soon. It's February 27th. So keep an eye out and make sure to buy her book. So thank you so much, Rebecca. It's always great to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
If you've missed any of this interview, don't forget to go to beingpatient.com. We always post interviews. We're going to post a link to I guess, is there a pre-order on Amazon? We can post that link so people can access the book easily. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.